that good?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm pretty sick, so I can't talk that loud. I apologize, but we'll do the best we can. The test is there's 50 questions plus 4 essay. Of those 4 essay, you have to choose 2. Out of the 50 questions, the first 40 are multiple choice. And then from 41 to 50 is one big matching section. So for the essay questions, like it said on the review sheet, there's one about like techniques that parents could use and how that affects their kids' development. There's one about progressing into old age and kind of the end of life stages. There's one essay about development early in life. And then one of the essays is almost exactly like one of the discussion board questions. It's not exactly like it, but if you did a thorough job on the discussion board question, you should understand it. Okay, so in terms of format, does everybody understand that? Is that pretty clear? Okay, so depending on the perspective, remember last chapter we talked about the contemporary approaches in psychology, so behavioralist, psychoanalytical, etc. Those perspectives are all going to differ on what the key thing for development is for an individual, right? So when you're interacting with people, like when you interact with individuals and you learn the norms and values of a country, of a civilization, what's that called? Like the internalization of the values and norms of a society. You get that from like your peers, from school. So you grow and you learn what's acceptable. Starts with an S.
Socialization.
Socialization, exactly. Okay.
So that's what?
Yeah.
What? It's like the
Socialization. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that they think playing peekaboo is so fun for little kids is because they haven't developed this sense that if they can't see something, it still exists. So if you like duck behind something, they think that you disappear, and then when you come out, they think that you naturally reappear. That sense that even if they can't see something, it still exists, what is that called? Can't see something, but it still exists. What's that called?
Object permanence.
Object permanence. Yep.
Might be better. I'll just set it over here.
Sure.
Or do y'all want it in the middle?
Probably fit it in the middle.
Just put it here as well.
And how many plates? Just the 2?
3.
3 plates? By the way, I love the jersey. I haven't seen it in about 16 years.
This stop?
What's that?
This stop?
No, the West Fargo jersey.
Oh, send this
It's
one.
been that long since I've been out of school, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, what is it called for a infant if there's a behavior that's a pre-programmed response to a stimulus? What's the general term for that?
Reflex.
A reflex. Good. Okay. So there were two types of reflexes that we talked about in class. One is if I were to take like my hand or a baby's hand and rub my hand here, then they would squeeze it, right?
Yeah.
That's called the grasping reflex. Yep. And then if you rub near a baby's face, they'll move their face towards whatever rubs. What's that called? Rooting reflex. Okay, what perspective was Freud in? What of the main approaches, the contemporary approaches, what perspective did he come from? Psychoanalytical, okay? So Freudians believe that children are born with two types of urges. What are those urges? So most of their problems stem from like frustrations with not getting those met.
Sexual, whatever.
Yep. So sexual urges, and then what was the other type? Kind of told you a story about how I was playing dodgeball one year and I wanted to body slam some guy that was elbowing me in the head. Remember? To demonstrate that. So if you're body slamming somebody, that's being aggressive, right? So Freud believed that children were born with both sexual and aggressive impulses. Okay, one of the theorists first of all, what was the guy's name that developed the 6 stages of moral development? And in those 6 stages, it was divided into 3 different levels. What was that guy's name? Kohlberg? Yep. So, what was each level called? It was like pre, and then the word, and then post. Which is close. Conventional, yeah. So, level 1 would be the pre-conventional level. Level 2 would be the conventional. And level 3 would be the post-conventional. So now, in the pre-conventional level, if somebody's in that level, what do they use as the basis to determine if something is right or wrong? So what do they define as like morally good?
Is that like that video with the kids and they ask them dolls and then
Right. Yep.
whatever feels good?
Yep. Pre-conventional, if it feels good, it's good. If it feels bad, it's bad. Okay? In the conventional level, what was the basis of morality? Rules, exactly. In the post-conventional level, what was the focus on determining what was moral?
Your values?
Yeah, abstract values. Yep. There was a guy that did research with baby geese known as Lorenz. He was trying to study something called imprinting, right? He was trying to study something called imprinting. Now, is imprinting something that takes a long time to develop, or can it happen in a fairly short period of time?
Fairly short.
Fairly short period of time, yep. So what did he study exactly? What was he trying to learn? He worked with an animal, specific type of animal.
Geese.
Baby geese, yep. And he wanted to see what?
What was when their critical period was? Like when they like essential time to develop skills and abilities most easily learned.
Right, yeah. So what he was trying to see is, would they identify him as their caregiver, as their mother, right? So he swam with them all the time. They weren't around like a mom.
Oh, now I remember.
So then they followed him around. So that was assessing that critical period, and then also imprinting.
So that is an example of imprinting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's sudden, it's quickly, right? They have an instinct to want to be cared for, to follow around whatever they see,
First.
and then so whatever they see quickly, that you get that imprinted sense of caring from that thing. Okay, next one. If like my daughter, 4 or 5 months from now, when she starts speaking a little bit, if she were to say, "Daddy car" or "Mommy play," what's that an example of? Well, yeah, it's a part of language acquisition, that's true. But more specifically, what is that an example of?
It's like association or something?
No.
Yeah.
It's a specific type of speech. Telegraphic speech. Yep, telegraphic speech. So it's basically like you can tell what they're trying to say. There's intent in it, but it's not correct. It's not complete, right? Okay. We talked a little bit about stuff called schemas. A schema is basically a mental representation of something that helps you to save time and process in it and remember things a little more easily. One of the ways that I demonstrated this in many of the classes was I said, okay, think of a police officer, right? Think of a cop. And then I asked you, did you think of somebody that was a guy or a girl? And everybody said what? A guy. So that's a specific example of what type of a schema. What type of schema is that? A gender schema. Yep. So now, let's say that you're a little kid and you have this schema in place that cops are guys all the time, right? And then you meet a girl that's a cop, so then you change your schema to include girls, right? What would that be an example of? What concept is that an example of? Accommodation. Yep. Now let's say that in your previous schema you were thinking of cops and you thought that they always had a uniform and a gun, but now you know that they all carry tasers too. So you've added something in new. What's that called? No. Assimilation. Yep. Okay. Erikson has his 8 stages of psychosocial development. At every stage, what kind of characterizes every stage? What's the thing that happens in every stage? There's
They have to like learn a new thing or meet like a certain requirement, and then they can go on to the next one, kind of thing. Like they have to learn a new quality.
no.
With conflict or something.
Yeah. There's a struggle inherent in every stage. That's the heart of every stage. Yep. So they don't necessarily have to learn.
I think.
Oh, okay.
In Erikson's theory, they don't necessarily have to learn something, but if they don't adequately resolve this conflict, then they'll have problems later, right? And the other thing with Erikson's stage is that you could go through that struggle any part of your life. It's just the main focus of when you're in that time period will be that specific struggle for most people. So for example, for people at the end of their life, right? The stage that they go through basically is, did they do a good job, right? Did they do a good job in their life? You're not gonna have to like list the names of the stages in order. So yeah, but basically there's a couple of key questions that if you understand the theory, you can use logic to answer them, okay? But at the end of the last stage, okay? You're an older person, you look back on your life and what you're asking is, did I do a good job? So that you call that integrity, or do you regret not doing stuff that you should have done, which you refer to as despair, right? So everybody has that sense at some point in their life, even before they're really old. But that struggle is especially prevalent when you're older, right? Okay. If I were to ask you to picture something in your mind, like in class I asked you to picture a basketball, and if people hold their hands and then hold out how big they thought a basketball was, your ability to picture something in your mind, what's that called?
Representational thought.
Somebody said it.
Representational thought.
Representational thought. Yep. Who was the guy that experimented with young rhesus monkeys?
Oh, that one where the mom clinging to the moms.
Right. Yeah, what was the guy's name?
Harlow.
Yeah, Harry Harlow. So essentially, the monkeys were given a choice between getting comfort from a wire mother that provided them with food, or a cloth mother that was just warm that didn't get food. And other than when they were eating, obviously, who did they spend most time with? Soft one. So when they were threatened, where did they go?
To the warm.
To the warm, soft one. They'd spend the vast majority of their waking hours with that soft mother. Now, Harlow also demonstrated that concept of a critical period where if they kept monkeys away from other monkeys, all they had was that wire mother and the cloth mother. They didn't have actual interaction with monkeys. Then later they tried to introduce them to the regular monkeys. Were they able to adjust or not? No, they weren't able to adjust. So that shows us that concept of a critical period, right? So you take mammals, little kids, whatever, if they have problems when they're younger, it's going to lead to problems later. Okay. In regards to development with boys and girls, is it better for girls to develop earlier or boys to develop earlier? Is that boys? Yep. What's the difference between a status and a role?
Status and a what?
And a role, R-O-L-E.
Oh.
Status and role. We talked about master status, gender role. A status is a social position you hold, like teacher, boyfriend, girlfriend, mother, father, lawyer, felon. a status that you hold in society. So a role is expected behavior for somebody that holds that status. So let's take father, for example, one of the statuses that I hold. In addition to, well, that's the status. Some of the roles I'm expected to carry out are providing for my daughter, right? Protecting my daughter, being a disciplinarian. So you have multiple roles with one status, right? So now let's think specifically about a gender role. A gender role would be the expected behavior of somebody that is a guy or a girl. Where does that come from? How do we determine what's important? Or how does society as a whole determine what behavior guys or girls should engage in?
A gender stereotype.
Okay, where does that come from?
It says distorted generalization regarding men and women. I don't know.
Okay, so where does that come from? Going deeper level. Oh, whoa, yeah. So society, right?
Yes.
Okay, so society tells us. And then does gender, like, or I should say sex, does biological sexuality play a shape in determining what type of gender role you should carry out? Like me, right? So does my biological sex determine part of what my gender role would be? Yes or no?
Kind of.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Because like a dad would be more of the protecting side, and mom would be more of the comforting side.
Right. So.
Is that what you kind of mean?
Yeah. So biologically, unless they're taking hormones or they have an operation or something, whatever, like guys are going to be, in general, there'll be an exception somewhere, but in general, guys are going to be more able to protect, like physically, their family if something should happen, right? Just like men aren't, or women are going to breastfeed, men aren't going to, unless again something different goes on. So gender role is kind of a combination of nature and nurture. Okay, when we talked about morality for adolescents and their parents, right? Do adolescents disagree with their parents entirely on their values, or do they agree with some of them? They agree with some of them, okay? So, give me a couple examples of things that adolescents agree with their parents regarding.
Religion.
Okay, religion's one. Good. What else? Religion, education is another one. What are some of the things they disagree with their parents on?
Curfew or something. Curfew.
Yeah, curfew, okay. Alcohol and drugs, and sexual activity. Okay, if something is androgynous, what does that mean? Yeah, it's something, it might not be a role necessarily, but it's something that has both males and female characteristics. Yeah. So androgynous is both male and female characteristics. What's the time period in life where women stop ovulating and can no longer reproduce? Menopause. Yep. what was the trend when we look at divorce rates in the United States? After World War II up until the present, what did they do?
Increase.
Until they're still increasing, or?
No, they increase and then they kind of level off.
Okay, so around when did they level off? Leveled off in the 80s. Okay, in young adulthood for Erik Erikson, one of the key tasks that people go through is becoming independent from whom? In young adulthood to Erik Erikson, one of the key tasks that people have to go through is becoming independent from somebody. Who are they trying to become independent from? From their parents, yeah. What are some of the reasons that couples gave for divorce? What are some of the reasons that couples gave for divorce?
Fighting constantly.
Okay,
Isn't it like if the woman is making more than the man?
those are correlating factors. These are, when you go to get a divorce in many states, they make you cite a reason. So,
Infidelity.
yeah, infidelity. Okay. What else?
Irreconcilable differences or something.
Yeah, irreconcilable differences. So problems in communication. Anything else? There's one other big thing that you're missing. Okay, lack of communication. Yep. Anything else? There's one other thing. One other thing. Money. Yeah, financial problems. Yep.
This is reasons for what?
Divorce. Yeah. So what Paige was talking about was what's called correlating factors. Those are things that you can look at without having to have people respond to you. You can just look at. And some of those things included young marriage, women making more money than the men, being married previously, right? And then not attending religious services. Okay. What's the main difference between a hospice and a hospital?
Hospice is where they go to your right?
They like make you
That's
more
part of it.
comfortable when you die instead of treating you.
Yeah, so a hospital, a lot of hospices will work out of your home, that's true. But the defining difference is hospitals are trying to fight to keep you alive, right? Hospices, it's for people that have some very serious form of a disease, often cancer, where they don't actually try to fight the disease, they just try to make you as comfortable as possible while you're dying. Okay, let's say that my daughter is fine around a bunch of people, but then if I leave, she gets kind of restless and scared. What's that called?
Separation anxiety.
Separation anxiety, yeah. So now let's say that she's, like, we're sitting in here by herself and then some people start showing up and she gets anxious around them. What's that called? Stranger anxiety. So you guys see the difference? Okay, we talked briefly about two forms of eating disorders. So anorexia and bulimia. What's the defining characteristic of both of those? What's something that both of them share?
Distorted body image.
Yeah, big time distorted body image, yep. So, which one of those two eat less? Anorexics eat less, yep. Bulimics are characterized by doing what?
Throwing up what they
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah, binging, yeah. Most of them will throw up. Some of them, they won't throw up, but they'll just like, they'll eat a bunch and then they'll take laxatives or exercise a ton or something. What's the name of the theory that talks about how language and thought are connected in individuals? Language and thought are connected in individuals. That's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
What is that again?
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So it's
What is it?
well, it talks about how language and thought are connected. So some of the things that it talks about are like if you can have more words for something, then it means that you know more about it than other people, right? And then also it means that you value that thing more than other people.
Like progressive.
Okay. Let's say that when he was younger, Wyatt used, like he's like 2 years old, right? 1.5, 2 years old, whatever. He'd run around naked all the time. And his mom would be like, you can't do this, Wyatt. Like, you can't. And he's like, but Mom, I'm having fun. And he's running around naked all the time, right? One of the reasons that he can't understand that it's not good to run around, that his mom's embarrassed, is because he can't put himself in her situation. So if you're unable to put yourself in somebody else's situation, what's that called? You're focused or you're centered on yourself, right? No.
Like,
Role taking helps you to learn to not be this.
like egocentric.
Egocentric, yep. Yep. Okay. Freud had his theory of psychosexual development. There are 5 stages to that, if you remember. What's the first stage? Oral stage. So in that stage, where do you get most of your pleasure from? From your mouth. So you look at little kids, and they're always putting stuff in their mouth. Okay? Second stage. Anal stage. And in that stage, where do kids get most of their pleasure from? Going to the bathroom. Yep. So at the heart of that stage is a struggle between them and their parents regarding when they can go, where they can go, etc. Okay? Third stage. Phallic stage. Third stage is the phallic stage. Fourth stage. Latency stage. So that's where sexual urges are repressed. This is where kids first learn something called sublimation. So that's where they, they're in the process of learning this all the time, but sublimation is like, remember Freud's perspective, you've got 2 natures to be aggressive and sexual. You're not going to get those parts satisfied all the time, right? Those natures. So to Freud, you had to learn how to accomplish other tasks, like go work out or learn to read or ride a bike, So redirecting those impulses to learning is called sublimation. And then the last stage is the general stage. So that's like puberty to through adulthood.
Is what, sorry?
Genital stage. Okay. Let's say that when you leave here, Jordan is like driving and she cuts off Haley. And then Haley's like, oh, you idiot, what are you doing? You're a horrible driver. You're stupid, you're a horrible driver. So then Jordan's thinking, oh, I'm distracted, right? I'm not really a bad driver, I was distracted. When she's like going in her head trying to explain why she just cut her off, what's that called for her?
Rationalization.
Rationalization, yep. So now, the tendency to attribute, like if you do something that's bad, if you say that that's because of the circumstances, like you were tired or you were distracted or you felt sick, whatever, but if you do something good, it's because you're a good person, you have good qualities, what's that called? 3 words. It's called the fundamental attribution error. Remember, I think I usually use an analogy of driving, right? In class, I think that's the analogy I used. Is that right? You guys? Like you guys pull out of the parking lot, one person cuts one person off. I used that in class, didn't I? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So if, I get an A on the test, it's because I'm smart, I studied hard, I'm a good student. Paige gets an A on the test, she was lucky, she's the teacher's pet, he didn't grade the essays as hard. It's not because she's smart, right? But if I do bad on the test, the teacher's a bad teacher, I was sick, right? It's not my fault. If she does bad on the test, she's stupid, she's lazy, etc. That explains the fundamental attribution error, okay? Okay. Marcia talked about 4 categories of identity development. 4 categories of identity development. So you guys draw a little box in your notes. And you move around the room to describe what different stages you were at. So if you have thought about what you want to do, like let's say college is the example I usually use, right? If you've thought about what college you want to go to and what you want to major in, and you have decided what your major is going to be, what would that be called? They all start with the word identity. So you've thought about your major and you've decided on it. What would that be called? If you look for that box, I think. Just draw it out too. Yeah, no, it's not foreclosure, but here, that's one of them though, so you're in the right spot.
Is it the achievement?
Achievement, yep. So basically, you should understand those, okay? There's a couple of those discussion on there. Remember I had you guys open your books when we talked about it? So if you've thought about it a little bit, but you haven't committed yet, what's that called? Can I see your book, Crystal? I'll just tell you what page it's on.
Oh,
It should be 136. Take it off.
I have to go to the recording.
Okay. Yeah, there's like 4 more things I want to talk about, so thanks.
moratorium.
Yeah, yeah. So if you look in, this section's on page number, I'll just find it for you. 107, okay? So, right, 107, so you're exploring identity issues, but you haven't committed yet, would be moratorium, okay? So basically, if you just draw this out and study this, that'll help you with like 3 of the questions, okay? 107, page number. Thank you. Okay. What's the term for the status that you hold that has the largest influence on who you are as a person? Master status, yep. Where do the ideas about gender come from a Freudian perspective? Who do you get your idea, like if you're a guy, who do you get your idea about what it is to be a man from? Yeah, your same gender parents, your father, right? So what's that called? When you associate yourself with like your dad if you're a guy, or with your mom if you're a girl, what's that called? Identification. Yeah, identification. What's the main difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Or what's one of the main differences, I should say? In terms of the symptoms, what's one of the main differences between dementia and Alzheimer's? Or I should say the effects.
Alzheimer's, you forget.
You can do that with dementia too.
Alzheimer's is fatal.
Right. Alzheimer's itself will kill you. Dementia won't. Right? Alright. That's it pretty much. Does anybody want me to explain something specifically? Or do you guys think that you're good, or?
What was the thing that had increased after World War II and then leveled off in the 80s?
Divorce.
What is crystallized intelligence and
Okay.
intelligence?
Crystallized intelligence is like the knowledge of stuff. So,
Like facts?
yeah, facts. So, who sang a certain song, or what the lyrics to the song are, what the cover of the album that the song was in looked like, names of friends that you hung out with in high school. You see a face and you remember what the name is, all that stuff. Just the facts that you could recall, or how to do stuff, that's crystallized intelligence. The ability to take that information and apply it to solve problems in a manner that's quick, that's fluid intelligence. So then, we talked about intelligence. Younger people are better in which of those 2 categories usually? Fluid or crystallized? Fluid, yep. And then since crystallized is largely a function of just experiences that you've had, older people tend to be better at that. Okay. Anybody else?
So is that like when we watched that video and it was like the feather breaks, whatever it was, and the little boy said that it wouldn't break, and the girl said it would?
Right. No, that's an example of the 4th stage of Piaget's stages of cognitive development, which would be the formal operational stage. So remember, there's 4 stages for that. First stage is the sensory motor stage. That's where you're just responding to stimuli. And then you have the pre-operational stage, then the concrete operational stage, and then the formal operational stage, okay? So in the video I showed you 4 different clips where they kind of tested it out. So the one of them was just the little kids, and then they hid something from the kids and tried to see if they could find where it was. They hadn't entered that second stage, that pre-operational stage. Then when somebody was going from the pre-operational to the concrete operational stage, they could then see causation, right? So the test they do is they give them the water glasses and they dump them over. And then the last one is to think abstractly and critically. So yeah, Piaget is a big theorist in like cognitive development, especially for like younger people. When we talk about development in younger kids, Piaget is like a big deal. So there, guys.
So should we know on this theory of psychological development here? So like we need to know all the stages or just recognize them?
Right. There isn't anything where it says, for example, what is Erikson's third stage, right? But there's a couple of questions that would say something like, in Erikson's second stage, this is the main struggle, this shows us that, and then you'd have to apply it. But there isn't anything that says, like, which of the following stages is the most common in late adulthood, okay? So you don't have to memorize those names, but you should understand the basic theory behind it. Because that one, the concept's more important than the names for that one. So some of the other theories, like if you go to school to be a teacher or a social worker, school psychologist, whatever, Piaget's theories of cognitive development, you'll hear about that a lot. So I try to emphasize knowing those a little bit more accordingly. That would be, well, that's about end of life and kind of death and dying, right? So, yeah, that might be important, maybe. She's like, is
I
he?
have a feeling this.
So Kubler-Ross had the Dagno thing.
Right. So, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Can you hear me down there? It's like, okay, I'm really trying, but it's like, I'm dying. Okay. If you have any, I can stay and explain stuff too if you need. This is cool. But I do want to get some more stuff to drink because I'm kind of struggling. Okay. So I'm going to shut this down too. I think that's